who understands the needs of people who live in developing countries the best? They do. So why is it that so many development agencies and projects and activities fail to ask them what they need and involve them in those solutions? I think it would happen more if we thought more about circles rather than pyramids of influence. For the last decade, I have served as the manager of a program within the World Bank called infoDev. It's my pride and my joy to have served in that capacity. The purpose of infoDev was to grow a tech entrepreneur class in developing countries and support tech startups in those countries. We set up innovation clusters and incubators to help those entrepreneurs take their ideas out of their minds and into the market. In the course of that time, I was able to work in well over 45 countries and travel and visit clients in double that number. It's been an honor to not only work and collaborate with tech geeks, as well as with heads of state. About 6 years ago, I was invited to inaugurate one of those tech hubs in a client country that we served. I turned up and was told by our local partners that the president wanted to see us. I was really excited. I wanted to brief him on our project, and actually I really wanted to hear his views on this growing tech entrepreneur community in his country that was starting to make waves across the continent. We went along to the palace and sat in an antechamber with lots of other people who apparently also had appointments to see the president. 6.5 hours later, we managed to go in for a half-hour audience. I sat with the president. Didn't get to talk very much about the entrepreneurs because he was intent on telling me his views about the World Bank. And let's just say he wasn't the biggest fan. The next day, I went along to launch this incubation effort, this incubator, and was awash with entrepreneurs and startups. I could feel a very different and palpable sense of energy and enthusiasm. And it made me think about structures. I had gone from the apex of decision-making to something that felt like a swirl of energy, a swirl of ideas, a very different type of influence. Everywhere you look in the world, you will see pyramids. You'll see them in government hierarchies. You'll see them in security agencies. Or think about the way that capital flows around the world, corporate governance. In international development, we have our fair share of pyramids. Resources flow from rich countries to poor countries, from developed countries to developing countries, and there's not always a lot of transparency around how those decisions are taken. Those decisions are also taken by relatively few people sitting at a supposed apex of this triangle, this pyramid. It kind of begs a question, or 4 questions. Are we leveraging our resources and using it in the most equitable way to serve the world's poor? Are we soliciting the views of the people that we ultimately are intending to benefit? Do those pyramids that we see everywhere, do they inhibit collaboration and the flow of information? Could there be other structures that would be a little bit more useful and sustainable? What sustainability It's essentially the endurance of systems, of processes, and of outcomes. International development agencies often talk about that triple helix of economic, social, and environmental sustainability, and that interdependence is not always an easy balance to strike. I think that I would add another dimension to the way I look at sustainability. Is there local ownership? Is there stewardship? Is there a shared interest amongst all in the outcomes? If I think about the times that my colleagues and I have launched a project, and years after we finished our participation, we continue to see it thrive and grow and multiply, I realized that we had used a very different hypothesis. We created circles of influence. We reached out to hundreds of stakeholders. We asked the private sector in those countries, tell us, where do you see markets that lay untapped? Where are the business regulations stopping you from addressing those markets? What are your needs for capital? The research and academic communities in those countries provided us with priceless data, analyses, and information on local market conditions which we would never have had. Governments shared with us their strategic vision for growth, for competitiveness of their countries, and we worked within that rubric. Users said to us, you know what, if I only had an app for that, I would pay good money for it. And we listened. Whenever we created those circles of influence, it struck me that we sometimes ended in different spots in the circle. Sometimes we were right in the middle of the circle. In Nepal, we launched a project to grow a fledgling digital content industry. We organized meetings for app developers, equipment vendors, cell phone operators, government agencies. Guess what? It was the first time they were all in the same room together. Our position in the circle, right in the middle, brokering, mediating. And the mutual mistrust was palpable. It took a long time to overcome it. In other cases, our spot in the circle was at the edge, actually kind of close to the exit. When we launched a center to help clean tech startups in Kenya, that group of people knew exactly what they wanted, and there was a relatively well-oiled machine of collaboration with academia, with research institutions, and a knowledge of a government that's trying to help its people. They knew what they wanted. They were in the driver's seat. We helped, we observed, we financed, then we left. Forces are changing these pyramid structures that we see all around us. And because most of my career has been spent in technology, let me talk about a few of those. The sharing economy is upon us. It's promoting models of collaborative consumption. Just look at Airbnb or Uber. Crowdsourcing is creating opportunities for citizen engagement and transparency and holding local governments to account. Think of Ushahidi. Ushahidi is a platform that's being used around the world for a range of things, from immediate responses to disasters to mapping election violence. It's being used in Kenya, South Africa, Eastern Congo, in Haiti, in Burundi, in Malawi, in Zambia, in Mexico, in India, and in Gaza. And those are just the countries that I checked last night. MOOCs, while they might be a little passé in the United States, have actually redefined the way learners and students in developing countries think about or gain access to educational materials they had never been able to dream about. And as we all know, when cell phones found their way into the hands and the pockets of people in developing countries, things were never the same again. The changes were profound. Not just were people able to transact in ways that they had never thought about before, their very method of communication changed as well. Did you know that in the Philippines, every day, 1.8 billion text messages are sent? 1.8 billion text messages per day. That is more than the annual number of texts that are sent across all of the European countries combined. A new way of communicating and organizing. Forces are also changing the direction that we think innovation and influence and information flows. It's supposed to flow from developed to developing. Technology is supposed to be transferred from rich to poor. Innovation flows in quite the same direction. But even that's changing, flattening that pyramid more than we think. M-Pesa is the world's most successful mobile money platform. It was started in Kenya. Half of the world's mobile money transactions take place in one country, Kenya. Some $10 billion worth of business was transacted over M-Pesa last year. 60% of Kenya's poor, those who live on under $2.50 a day, transact daily multiple times over the M-Pesa platform to pay their rent, to buy their use of electricity for the day, to access a range of information from local government. It's being rolled out in many other countries. I told you a moment ago about ushahidi. Ushahidi is Swahili for witness or testimony. Ushahidi was started by 4 Kenyan activists in the wake of the 2007 disputed presidential election in Kenya. It was meant to be a platform equipped with Google Maps for citizens to provide real-time accounts over email or text message of election violence. 3 years later, the Ushahidi platform was used in Louisiana. It was used to create an oil spill crisis map to address the worst accidental oil spill in American history. Now, I would be the first to admit that circles don't work everywhere, and neither do they work perfectly. You don't need a circle of influence with a multiplicity of views in an air traffic control tower. And they don't work perfectly. They reflect the sociocultural mores and the socioeconomic realities of the countries in which we find our clients. Women struggle to gain access to those circles every single day, to exercise their rights as business owners, as citizens, as mothers, as human beings. Yet women make up half of the world's population, half of the world's productive labor force. They are 70% of the world's poor. They are 2/3 of the world's illiterate. But they knock every day asking for access to those circles. The McKinsey Global Institute assesses that if we were to achieve full gender parity in the labor force, so full equality of the sexes in the labor force by 2025, the world would add $28 trillion to its GDP. $28 trillion. That's the size of the US and Chinese economies combined. So here's the truth. Whether it's a circle or a pyramid, there is no sustainability without equality. And until women and men are able to exercise the same rights and have access to the same opportunities, we can't meaningfully talk about sustainability. But in closing, I want to say this. I still believe in circles of influence, and everything I've seen in my career reinforces that. When you co-opt and co-design, when you co-finance, and when you leverage the strengths of a multiplicity of actors, chances are you will come up with a more robust and sustainable solution. I believe it creates better outcomes. It enfranchises those who do not have voice or agency. It creates smarter consumers who are able to make more informed choices. But most importantly, circles of influence place the poor in their rightful place. And that is not at the base of a pyramid. That's right there in the middle of the circle. Thank you.